Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters by Anfield Index. It is about 24 hours after yesterday's final where maybe you're all feeling a bit deflated. Maybe you're a bit angry. Maybe you're a bit disappointed. Maybe you're as spiteful as the chats in the chat comment from last week. Maybe, though, you're excited thinking, give me some copium because of the league title to be won. And I'm looking forward to the international break. Maybe you're absolutely none of the above. But as ever, I'm joined by the respected, the renowned David Lynch, who, similar to me, was pretty shocked by the price of booze in London yesterday, is probably the best way to sum up the final, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is one shocking element about heading down south, unfortunately. But yeah, it is. One thing I will say about going down to London, it is always a pleasure to get down there to a Wembley final, and not every club gets to do these and make the most of it. So there is a positive in that. Unfortunately, of course, the positives kind of ended there in terms of the result and the performance in Liverpool, which we will of course get into. But yeah, it's not a great place to lose, but it is always a good place to go, even if the pints are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the experience, and we've had that. I mean, let's get into it. And as much as we are going to analyse and look at certain things, in simple terms from the headlines, it was a fair result at the end of the day. You can't really have any complaints, can we?
No, absolutely not. I just think, I think both sides got what they deserved. So I think that a good starting point is to give huge credit to Newcastle for their performance that they put in. I thought they were absolutely brilliant to a man, not just, in terms of the quality that they showed, but also, the work rate, the desire, just ran all over Liverpool in a way that we are so used to seeing Liverpool do to other sides.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of Klopp-like performance actually from them. Just they were so good in terms of their press and so aggressive that Liverpool couldn't really get going. And as I say, that kind of added up really to them deserving it on that basis. And Liverpool just didn't match it. They didn't do enough to get there and match that level. And by contrast, looked kind of sluggish, sloppy. And if you do that in the Wembley final, and there was just no point at which in the match really that it felt like Liverpool were kind of showing the best or getting some rhythm going or really starting to disrupt Newcastle's rhythm. It was pretty much from minute 1 to minute 90. That was kind of the flow of the game. And so, if that's how the game plays out, then you just cannot argue with the fact that Newcastle ultimately deserved it because they outperformed Liverpool by a rather large margin in the end.
Yeah, and it's unanimous across the board from anyone that you speak to on that. And even from both of us that were there, the eye test, it is almost impossible to argue about it. I mean, Robbie Fowler talked about it afterwards, as it's showing there on screen if you join us on YouTube or social media, saying we were lacking energy and fight. In terms of just the battle, was it will, do you think, or could we just not match their physicality?
Yeah, I did say on the day, and I kind of stand by this to an element, that I just think there was a little bit of Newcastle wanting it more. I mean, it clearly meant so much more to them. I mean, you could see it in the stands. I thought that the Newcastle fans, you could tell they wanted it more. It was more important to them because, look, it's the first major trophy in 70 years, isn't it? It's going to mean an awful lot to them. And they've been in that final recently as well and lost it. And so it's another chance to finally get over the line. So, it did seem like that desire was there. It felt like, for their fans going down to Wembley as well, it was a massive occasion, one they wanted to make the most of and make sure that they finally won this time. Whereas for Liverpool fans, I mean, kind of streaming in a little bit late. This is, something they're really used to, going to League Cup finals, winning them. This would have been the third in 4 years had they won it. So, I just think on a subconscious level amongst supporters and players, there's this little bit of kind of, we've done this before. This is, you don't desperately want it as much as you maybe previously did. And that, those fine margins, I thought, like I said, I thought the Newcastle fans were magnificent in the stands and roared on the team. And the team responded by producing a performance that did kind of underline that they were just desperate to win this game. And there was none of the kind of nervousness that you maybe saw the first time they were in the Carabao Cup final. This time it was, they'd used the experience of that, but still had that underlying desire there that they really, really wanted to get this trophy and end that drought. And I think that did kind of show in the performance that they did just want it that little bit extra.
Yeah, I think it's hard to deny. It's interesting when Eddie Howe talks afterwards. He said even when they played us at Anfield and we beat them 2-0, they didn't want to show their hand, and they've been working on some of the set pieces for a couple of weeks. Whereas Arne Slot and Virgil van Dijk both tried to deny that, they wanted it more. But I think we all saw that on the day, and it is kind of understandable in that regard. And I did want to talk about Arne Slot, and I want to sort of pivot into this in the right way, because Arne Slot has been absolutely sensational for Liverpool this season. It's a brilliant debut season against a challenging backdrop coming into, no doubts about it at all. But there's been a number of things I think people have felt in the last few games that maybe it's just not, whether it's quite been there or the decision making hasn't been what we'd want it to be. I mean, even going to the lineup, I know I messaged you before. I was massively surprised that Diogo Jota was in. You wondered Gravenberch looked leggy the other night. A few of them did. But bar the Kelleher for Alisson one, which we kind of knew was coming because it's the Carabao Cup, and Kwanzaa, because we had to play someone at right back. Was it surprising for you that there was so little changes?
Yeah, but I guess you kind of think from game to game, every game is slightly different, isn't it? And so you hope that even though it's gone with the same team, you can have a totally different game, as I say, different outcome. So, the hope would have been going into a game against Newcastle that it would have been more similar to maybe the Anfield game where Liverpool were totally dominant. And if you're in that situation, you are dominating the game and you're creating chances as Liverpool did in that Anfield game. I guess the question is on the Jota thing, who do you want on the end of the chances? Who's more likely to put the ball in the back of the net, Darwin Núñez or Diogo Jota? Now, in theory, that's how it works. But obviously, the reality at the moment is that Jota isn't getting those chances, is he, at the moment? Nah. He's looking a yard short since that injury. He's had a really poor season, to be honest. But the reason I think Slot goes with him, like I say, is because he wants that finishing prowess on the pitch that he knows is there. And also it says something about his lack of trust in Núñez as well. So, I wasn't massively shocked that was what he went with. And I still think he could have got a much better performance out of that team because, as I say, Liverpool did dominate Newcastle relatively recently. So they are capable of doing that. But in the end, what Newcastle got and what kind of rendered all selection decisions irrelevant really was that they got the game played on their terms, which was their man-to-man press absolutely killing Liverpool, putting them under pressure, forcing Liverpool to go long into a front line that couldn't really win second or first balls. So had no way of really getting out in that way. And then whenever they did get a little bit of set possession, getting in deep and making that really difficult for Liverpool. So it just was a game kind of played on their terms, really. And I think you're kind of right about Slot. We didn't manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat this time at halftime, which he's done so many times this season.
Yeah.
And, you look at the plan, just whatever the plan was, it clearly didn't work because, as I say, Newcastle dominated. But I do think kind of the story of this game for me, outside of Slot's decisions, really is, I think it's the one weakness this Liverpool team has maybe shown is that when teams do go man-to-man against them and turn the game, or even not necessarily even when they go man-to-man, we saw this in the Everton game, if the opposition are able to turn the game into physical duels all over the pitch, then this Liverpool team is lacking. And to be fair to Slot, I don't care how good of a manager you are and how much of a tactical genius you are, that is very hard to overcome because you can't stop that. There's not a lot you can do. I mean, Atalanta did the exact same thing in the Europa League last season. We've seen it whenever teams have gone man for man against this Liverpool team, and they do have these big physical profiles like Newcastle are blessed with. It's something Liverpool can't cope with. And, we don't want to go too deep into how big of a problem this is because look at Liverpool's league position, it's not been too bad. But I think the one area, and this is the big lesson for me coming out this last couple of weeks, is that I think they just need a bit more physicality throughout the team. And that was the major problem. And the reason that Slot, there wasn't much he could come up with to change it because he couldn't make his players bigger.
Nah, it's funny that for all Newcastle talent, and Isak scores again, he's brilliant. They got the likes of Tonale, Bruno, who are good on the ball. There's no doubts about it at all. The two players that probably really stand out for Newcastle in this game is Joe Linton almost ragdoll our midfield at times, just physically battered them, for want of a better phrase at times, just won that all day long. They couldn't live with it. And then Dan Burn probably couldn't believe how often Liverpool were pinging long balls onto his head, almost targeting him somewhat. That was him. And the one thing that I said it in the stadium with the guys that were sat to, I know Arne Slot explained it afterwards, David, but was there a part of you that Alexis McAllister is on Dan Burn? Dan Burn is winning every single corner that goes into the box. Now, I know that you talked about how we won't mark in zones and we move people, and you want Konate and VVD free. I'd get that. I understand that. But was there not a part of you that thought maybe you might switch Kwanzaa, who's good in the air as well, onto Burn, or just something to stop Dan Burn making unmarked headers in our box?
Yeah, I mean, it's just such an easy fix as well, because I told, like you said, the manager did kind of explain it, and explained it well in terms of how they worked from those corners. But it was every time Newcastle got a corner and they got a good few in that first half, they were just pinging them flatly, weren't they, back post.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be a kind of a clever delivery or like put any spin on it or anything like that. It was just, you knew exactly where they were trying to hit, and they were hitting it every time. And Dan Burn will win that header there. So as soon as you see that that's the tactic, I just don't see it's madness to me that they can't just do a quick swap there. And as you say, just yes, you go man to man and zonal, and it's kind of a mix of the two. But if you're going to do that, then just recognize quite early in that game that the one of those man to man marking, one aspect of that man to man marking there is a complete mismatch, and you need to do something about it. And that's a little bit, the players maybe could manage that themselves on the pitch a bit better. But I also don't think Slot even changed it at half time either, which really should have been sorted. So that is a disappointment, because as much as Newcastle battered Liverpool and completely deserved to win, Slot goes on about set piece balance, doesn't he, in games quite a lot. And the set piece balance was 1-0 in Newcastle's favour, and they win the game by a single goal. So as bad as Liverpool played relative to how good Newcastle played as well, if the set piece balance had been equal, then that game goes to extra time, and maybe Liverpool somehow nick it. So you can't be conceding set pieces, and you've got to be smart about how you defend them. And I don't think Liverpool were in that situation. Maybe that's a little bit of a disappointment from it, really.
Yeah, it was coming, which is always unfortunate. And maybe it is hypercritical, but I have watched it back, because even you just think and you look at it, the goal, Dan Burn, I'm not saying it's, it's a great header, it's a great leap. Would you have backed Alisson to have saved that?
Yeah, I was having this debate with a few mates after the match yesterday, actually, when I met up with them about whether that would be the case. I think what we kind of settled on in the end really was that you don't know whether Alisson would have saved it, but he maybe could have. He's good enough to save that one, even though it's in the corner. His movement at his feet, he's just so sharp, isn't he, that he maybe would have got there and got something on it. You do, no matter how good Quivine Kelleher is, you weaken your team, don't you, when you take the best goalkeeper in the world out of it. But equally, I would never go back and do anything different in that regard. I think if you make the promise to your sub goalkeeper that he is going to get that competition, then you have to, as a manager, you have to stick to your word in that regard. And Kelleher's won 2 League Cups at Liverpool himself anyway. So it's just one of those where maybe he could have saved it, Alisson, had he been in goal, but we will never know. And don't want to put too much on Kelleher, because he's been an unbelievable servant. That's his 3rd League Cup final he's played for Liverpool, and he's won it twice. So it maybe, I guess.
Yeah, Red Armchair supporter there agrees. Sorry, says it's unfair to put it on Kelleher, and also saying setting up at corners in a certain way is fine, but it's not working. That's football. You do have to change it as well, which would probably be one of the disappointments that way. I mean, in terms of looking for some positives, and it is important to sort of single out, I think, a few players. I mean, it was dismal for large periods, but the subs, I thought, especially Curtis Jones played a part as well, but Elliott and Chiesa, they really brought a difference to the team, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, the one he almost scores, which he starts from his own half, just kind of summed up exactly what you have to do to beat a man-to-man press. Is you have to be brave, take the ball in areas where it's really, really dangerous, and turn your way out of it. And then all of a sudden, you've got numerical superiority. So that's the way to go about it. And it's telling that he comes on and does that immediately, and Liverpool start to look better. So he is very good in that regard as well. So I thought he made a telling impact. As you say, I thought Harvey Elliott was bright, and then Chiesa comes on and gets the goal as well. And it does just kind of beg the question, doesn't it? You look at Chiesa putting that one away.
Yeah.
Could he have been used more this season? Why have we seen so little of him? Obviously, early in the season, totally get that. He had those fitness issues, and not a lot you can do about that. And they managed him through those. But now he's been on the other side of it. Why? He took that brilliantly, didn't he? He gets shots whenever he's on the pitch for Liverpool. Does he deserve more? And it just seems like it's sort of heading towards him leaving in the summer, really, because I just can't imagine he is very happy with the amount of minutes he's had this season, and that situation is going to drastically change going into next season either. So there's a big kind of question mark over his future, but surely we could have seen more, particularly in this run where goals have been hard to come by as well.
Yeah, it is strange. And the comments are flying in around this. Reg Abbey saying, we have a 12-point lead by basically using a 4 midfield rotational season slot lacks the trust. And in that respect, it's caught up with us. I mean, that is part of the clamour. It is a bit strange, you're thinking, when they've come in recently, like Chiesa fires yesterday, Elliott gets the assist, looked lively recently, even in the Champions League and different games. But it is fair to say, no matter what we see almost and how tired these players are, there is a clamour, but it really just doesn't seem, especially Chiesa, I think. Like, Gakpo again came on and just was injured, I think it's fair to say, unfit, whatever you want to call it, but still Chiesa can't get on the pitch. It is a bit strange, it seems, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what I find fascinating about this as well is that, I was always thinking of the mindset that kind of, okay, Chiesa just mustn't be doing it in training. He must not look that good. And that's why nothing's changing. And similarly with Elliott and Endo and anybody else who's on that kind of fringes, who's not being trusted through the season. But then his comment in the press conference really stood out to me ahead of this one, where he was talking about kind of, we don't get a lot of time on the training pitch because it's been so many games in midweek, and therefore the players who are on the fringes don't necessarily train with the first team very often, because the ones who play the games then are doing recovery, and then you get a little, 20 minutes together or whatever. So you're not making that direct comparison of kind of like, okay, for the last 5 or 6 training sessions, Chiesa has been out finishing Diaz. He's looked brilliant. He's looked sharp. Yeah. Diaz has maybe not been finishing that brilliantly. Maybe I should make that switch for this weekend. None of that has been going on. And that, the problem is, how does that solve itself for next season? Because you presume Liverpool are going to be as busy again next season. They're going to be doing the same training routine. And, you don't want to change that training routine, by the way, because it's been what's kept all these players fit for the majority of the season. So it just doesn't seem like, if you are Harvey Elliott or Chiesa, you're really given a kind of fair crack at getting in the team. Or that's certainly what I took from what he said there. And it seems to be playing out that way, because we have barely seen these players. And, like I say, when Chiesa has been on the pitch, he's generally got a lot of shots, and then he scores the goal yesterday. Could Liverpool have got a little bit more out of him? That for me is a big question. And like I say, I still think there are now doubts over his Liverpool future as well. And it just feels that's the way it's going. So it's it's a shame, and I think it's one of the big things really that kind of needs to be addressed, doesn't it, going into next season? Is that you maybe need to see more use of the squad, and maybe it will just emerge, and it will turn out that basically, the reason he hasn't been using them is because he just doesn't trust them at all, or doesn't rate them highly enough. These players who are on the fringes, but and if he does get his right men in, then we will see more rotation. But it's a big question mark, I'd say, going into next season. Not necessarily a huge negative or anything to be overly worried about, but it's a question mark. It's something we don't know the answer to at the moment, and I think a really interesting talking point, really.
Yeah, as we know, and Slot's talked about that it was a summer or season of assessment. So when he gets a chance, and Richard used everyone to sort of purchase their own players, it will be interesting to see, does rotation come into the element? And for the players that do look a little bit tired, I mean, my thoughts. I'm never a fan of international football, but the international break, do you think almost just a change of scenery, maybe moving away from everything that's going on at the moment after back-to-back defeats for the first time in Slot's career? isn't a bad thing? Or is it a case of now there's competitive international games, this will add to the stress that way? How are you seeing this one?
Yeah, but anyone who thinks that this is all down to fatigue will probably not be happy about this international break, because, as you say, the likes of Gravenberch, Van Dijk, Salah, they're all going to be playing games, aren't they? And that's always a bit of an injury risk and a nightmare in terms of that. And obviously, you worry about that fatigue being added to. I guess it is at least a chance to, a little bit of a mental reset. Some of these players go away and maybe score for the countries and get some confidence. Someone like Gakpo could probably do with being played back into full fitness and sharpness as well. So it's not all bad news. And yeah, you just hope they can come back and it has been an opportunity to reset, and that they can pick up where they not pick up where they left off, because obviously that's been back-to-back defeats, but kind of start up anew really, and find the form again. And it is helpful that obviously they come back. It's an FA Cup weekend, so they've got a bit of time off. Full preparation then for Everton. No worries about the South American players. They should be involved, hopefully, if they're fit. So that is a boost. And then it's all about kind of just starting to get the results rolling in and move closer to sealing the title.
Yeah, absolutely. It might not, funnily enough, just be the worst time in the world for this break. We'll have to see on that one. And as ever, as we move on to the off-the-field stuff, it's another day and another transfer link. And I know you'll have seen this. Is the big story that's kind of sort of got everyone talking. Liverpool's Sam Maguire article linked with Julian Alvarez, the former Manchester City, the current Atletico Madrid forward. Fair to say, a big name in world football. So there's a lot of people excited by this, especially as he's got 23 goals this season. He's got a pedigree for the Premier League. So you know what I'm going to ask you on this, and there's a couple of others mentioned in the article. Heard anything on it? Think there's something in this one at all?
Yeah, definitely in terms of Liverpool having held an interest in him, and I'm sure they'll be keeping an eye on how he's getting on at Atletico, because he's an absolutely top player. But I wasn't particularly given encouragement that this is definitely one they're going to pursue in the summer. I spoke to a couple of people, and didn't get that vibe that he is maybe going to be the one. If they do, we expect that they will sign a centre forward, but didn't really get huge encouragement, as I say, that they're going to kind of push for him. And I just do think that it looks a really tough deal to do to me, because he's only been there for one season. Obviously, he's doing really well there. I'm sure they fight tooth and nail to keep him a bit longer, and would demand an absolutely incredible fee because of his contract situation. So I just think it's a tough one to do. And as I say, I wasn't given massive encouragement on it.
It's an interesting one. And the chat panel's gone busy on this one, saying Alvarez is class. Some feel he is more attainable. And I'm guessing, in terms of more attainable, this is the one that came up because we talked about them before. But even today, I know, as you've seen, a couple of players to ask about almost again. Isak, that name just won't go away. There's a fresh link. Even Fabrizio Romano says it today. And Benjamin Sesko into the mix. So Sam Maguire mentioned him, and a few others have started to mention that name as well. Just for, I suppose, Isak, you've always been that we know if Newcastle get the Champions League, this is near on impossible, but nothing's changed on that for you. It's struggling to see that deal at all.
Yeah, I still am a little bit skeptical about him being it. It does, a lot depends on where they end up in the table, really, and whether they get Champions League football. If they do, then I really just cannot see him leaving at all. He's going to get Champions League football. They've won a trophy. He's still got 3 years remaining on his deal. Newcastle's hand would be incredibly strong. So it's just very difficult to see. Obviously, if they fall outside of it and they maybe think they need to use that money and they can put it in other areas of the squad, maybe there's something there. Because it's quite clear, isn't it? Liverpool really like him. But it's just, we'll always say this, a lot has got to come together for that one to come off. It would be a really tricky deal to do. And a big deal as well, because obviously Newcastle would demand an incredible fee because he's still got 3 years left on his deal. So it's, I still think this is a really tough one to do as well. And I don't want to kind of rain on everyone's parade in terms of that. I feel, that's the kind of feeling around both those deals at the moment. And a lot can change, and things do change coming into the summer. And we are still very far away from that. But just at the moment, I'm just a little bit skeptical about Liverpool's chances of signing Isak. But if there was a situation, by the way, where Arsenal were in and it looked like they were going to get him, you would expect that Liverpool would then try and kind of compete.
I agree. Almost would have that Luis Diaz feel when Spurs came in and like that, just to almost stop that and thinking, yeah, what would this mean for us? It would be no surprise at all. And I suppose the third name, I mean, Alvarez and Isak, we can't deny their top caliber, their goals, their pedigree, the big money. It almost feels like, maybe it's harsh, but a level down. Almost Sesko might be the cheaper option, if that's the right phrase. Heard anything on this player at all? Because there has been a number of links, including that Sam Maguire one.
Yeah, so 100% a player that Liverpool are watching. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, look at the club he plays for, his age profile, the fact he's banging in goals in a top 5 European league. It's not a surprise that he's being watched closely. I guess the big question, and I don't know the answer to this, is whether they feel he's kind of ready to make that step yet. He is still only 21. There is elements when I've watched him of a little bit of rawness there. But he's 100% on the radar, I would say. And again, I don't know. It's still, we're not close to the summer yet. There's still a while yet before these kind of decisions are made in terms of if he's far enough along. And like I say, I'm not personally got a kind of view on whether he's ready or not. But this one, it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up being someone that Liverpool pursue, because he's definitely liked, and there is a lot there to like as a 21-year-old striker with a good goal record in that league, and also physically quite impressive.
Yeah, it all leans towards, I don't think anyone's got any doubt that a forward's coming in some format, what nature that will be, what type of player it will be. And we kind of alluded to this a bit, and I know you mentioned it earlier in the show. We're obviously thinking about what we're seeing now and what that can mean for the summer. And if we think about the forward line, it's strange that we've got 6 and where we are in the league, but there is a number of question marks for different reasons against a number of them, maybe bar Gakpo and even Luis Diaz. I mean, Fabrizio Romano saying there that there's a concrete possibility he could leave Liverpool this summer. That Saudi links come up again. Barcelona are always mentioned. He's right, and it's understandable, isn't it, David, that quite a few have got question marks against a number of that forward line.
Yeah, I mean, I a couple of months ago, I would have said kind of Liverpool would like to avoid any real churn in that area. Maybe you'd see Núñez go and maybe one brought in to replace him, but it's just, I almost feel like it's going to end up being unavoidable for Liverpool, because if a decent offer comes in for Diaz with his level of production, you just know, and his age as well, and his contract situation, you just know Liverpool would consider it. There's no question about that. As much as they generally like to avoid churn, if you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, and if a decent fee comes in for him, I'm pretty sure that Liverpool are minded to accept it. We know that is definitely the case with Darwin Núñez, and we do expect him to leave. And then you throw on top of that, Chiesa is not going to be happy with the minutes he's getting. Does an Italian club come in and kind of look to pinch him? And then, Salah's contract's still not signed. Yeah. So it just started, you very, very quickly get into an area where you're looking at so many of those players and those forwards being in their futures being in doubt. So, I almost kind of think and expect now that there is going to be a lot of churn in that forward line, really. And like I say, it's probably not an ideal situation for Liverpool, because it might affect how you start the next season. But like I say, if the offers are good enough and Liverpool will see that as an area where they can get upgrades, then I think that churn might happen. Yeah, it's an interesting one, really.
Yeah, you say there, Johnny Rico saying Diaz isn't the player he was anymore. Gerard Williams saying, if Diaz is drawing league, what effect will that have on McAllister? Well, if you sign Julian Alvarez, that gives him a pal there, doesn't that? So that might sort that issue. But I did actually, the midfield one's interesting, because under previous, regime, Jurgen Klopp, it was quite clear Liverpool were looking for a physical 6. It ended up being Endo, but that was after, many options had almost not come to fruition. Now we've seen under this manager, there was always the talk of a Zubimendi, a metronome, someone that can play in that double pivot and move the ball. But I know you alluded to this yesterday. We've got so many people that are good on the ball, like McAllister, superb, Curtis Jones. Is the one thing out of all the profiles, as evidenced yesterday, physicality in that midfield might be the call of the day if there's a summer signing.
Yeah, I think so. Really, they could do with just adding someone who's big and gets around the pitch and covers a lot of ground, but wins their physical duels. Because as you mentioned earlier, you watched Joe Linton up against him yesterday and just kind of bullying them, and just having someone in there who could do that for Liverpool would be very, very helpful. Really, none of the Szoboszlai and Gravenberch are big lads, but they don't really put it about in that way. They're not kind of, they don't really make use of it in the way that maybe a Joe Linton does. And I just think Liverpool need to add that. That doesn't, by the way, necessarily have to be an out and out six. It could be someone who's in those 8 positions and goes hunting for the ball and is that kind of player. And as I say, ideally, I think Liverpool would sign someone who can play in all three midfield positions because it gives them options then to rotate, makes it easier to do that. If you're not just, you can't find someone who's going to kind of rotate with Gravenberch because he's not going to want that. This player is not going to want that. So I think ideally you get someone who can do a bit of everything. But if they have, I think top of the list for that player would be that kind of physical profile where they are big and they can add a bit of steel to Liverpool's midfield, because it is just one of those areas I think they've just been a little bit short this season.
Yeah, and people throwing in names, missing a Caicedo type. Balaba's been mentioned. Edison from Atalanta, who we know was linked under Klopp in that regard as well. And I suppose we saw it yesterday a little bit, and this is maybe the toughest one. I think for me yesterday, and I know people will say, well, it was Quansah, not Bradley, but you see how much is missing without Trent Alexander-Arnold. So a creative element, if he goes, which I think many suspect, if you're honest, someone creative's got to come into the side in some position, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing. If Trent goes, they have to find someone who can progress the ball for them, whether that is a deep lying midfielder or they change the way that they build up or whatever. It was just so obvious how much they missed him. And like you say, they would have missed him slightly less had it been Bradley, because he can get you up the pitch through his dribbling. And Quansah's not kind of gifted in that regard. And that was a real problem for Liverpool yesterday. But I just think he makes such a big difference when he's on the pitch in terms of Liverpool getting the ball in the final third. In fact, you remember the first game against Newcastle this season at St. James's Park, and he comes on as a sub in that game and the game completely changes. I think he's on for half an hour and makes more passes into the final third than any Liverpool player.
Yeah.
So that kind of shows you how important he is. And particularly against these teams who go man for man and press you really high, you've got to find a way of getting the ball past that and not just lumping it up the pitch, which is what Liverpool ended up doing. Having him at right back is a bit of a cheat code. Now, obviously, the problem is when you do go to replace him, you're not going to find another right back like him, because there isn't one in the world. So it's all about how creative can they get in terms of coming up with solutions to work around that. And it's an interesting one, because obviously we still don't know exactly what his future is going to hold. But it's if he doesn't stay, it's a real problem that Liverpool have got to solve. And I think yesterday kind of spelled that out.
Yeah, there's definite things in the shorter and mid-term future, no doubts about it, to sort and to see. But I do want to sort of finish on the last bit, as we always talk about, and try and bring things back to where we are. We always try and bring a bit of a positive vibe as well. I mean, the ultimate thing to say is, despite yesterday, and it's right that people will be disappointed, still feeling it. I get all that. But I have seen a little bit like this is all under threat now. The wheels are coming off, like a Jamie Webster style song. Liverpool are still going to win the league title, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely baffling to me, by the way, that people don't like people can't think beyond the last 2 results, which were against really good sides who did well and had a good plan. And there was all these mitigating circumstances there. It's like now they think Liverpool will now just lose forever. And that's, this team is totally useless. It's absolutely maddening. I mean, they've got a 12-point lead there. There's just no chance that Arsenal. I mean, you look at Opta's model, by the way, for this, and they put Liverpool at 99% likely to win the league. I mean, I quite fancy those odds, and the bookmakers aren't that far away from that either. So they just will win the league. There's no question about that. And I think it's I always say this, but it's quite funny to me, kind of seeing people calling them bottlers and saying they're going to bottle the league, and they're the fans themselves who are kind of bottling it and getting panicky. It just seems a little bit daft to me, but there's no question whatsoever that Liverpool are going to go and win the league.
It is crazy. I know wider afield in the media. There's even Martin Keown, it came up on my timeline, Talk Sport, like you said, using that word, Liverpool are bottling this season, and it's just a league title. I mean, if you think at the start of this season, on the slot, what happened after the lack of options in the window that materialised? We talked about it, that a top four domestic trophy isn't a bad season. And I mean, even now, like the fact we're going to win the league, I mean, to put a score on it for people, I understand some will say, well, you can't give it 10 because it's not perfect and there's not a double, but it's probably about as close to a 10 if we win the league, isn't it, really, for Arne Slot?
Yeah, I mean, if someone had sat us down at the start of the season and said this was going to happen, you'd absolutely like snatch your hand off, wouldn't you, for that to win a league? Because we've only seen it once in 35 years, so to get another one is absolutely miraculous. And the fact is, you know, Slot's been taught a few lessons, hasn't he, in this run of games and learned a lot about his team and things. But I just thought there were going to be more of these lessons, more of these kind of welcome to the Premier League. This is what it's like, you know, where Liverpool just lose games they shouldn't be losing, but you know, he's learning about the league and what it's like. But there was just no. It just hasn't happened this year. That, you know, he's basically avoided all those lessons and been absolutely fine. And you know, the two lessons he's got have been in a cup final against a Newcastle side desperate to win it, and a PSG side who I think will probably go on and win the Champions League. So he's done incredibly well to do that. And like I say, the title's not in doubt. They are going to win that, and that for him to do that in his debut season is absolutely incredible achievement. And yeah, I totally get everyone being disappointed with losing finals. It's never nice, and and Liverpool want and will aim to be better. But you have got, you know, the lack of perspective I just find crazy, and I don't know, the inability to kind of regulate emotions around football. Sometimes it's just you know, I just think it's gone a little bit too far sometimes, the way people talk about it. There's no empathy, there's no treating players as humans or understanding where the project's up to or any, you know, it's always just kind of the only good season ever will be when Liverpool win the quadruple. And it's just, for me, that's not a healthy way to engage with the sport, really. And you know, I think some of the reaction, it is primarily online. I'm, you know, ranting about my own YouTube comments here, but it's, but yeah, I think it's not a good way to look at football, to be absolutely devastated with only the Premier League title.
Yeah, it does seem crazy. As Red Armchair Supporter says there, many have reacted as if winning the Carabao somehow invalidates winning the league, where we know the chasm between those two. And as LAPS said there, it's been a great season for me when we win the league. Yeah, absolutely no doubts about it. And even for those that may feel a little bit like, and the wheels are coming off still, and there's still a few flying in the chat panel, I've got to be honest, David, that you look at the fixtures left to go. I mean, there's the derby under the lights, which everyone's looking forward to, Wednesday, the 2nd of April. But just in terms of like, yeah, you can say Fulham away, but they're almost mid-table, aren't they? That's sometimes the teams you want to play. West Ham at home. We know West Ham are kind of an up and down team. Leicester horrific at the moment. Spurs will have a focus on their Europa campaign as well, won't we? That Conference League, no doubts about it. It's all they've got left to play for. It's not a bad list of fixtures. There's a lot of home games. We don't even need to win them all. It does all just sit in our favour, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the fact is, Arsenal have got to, you know, for Liverpool to throw it away now, they've got to kind of lose 4 games, haven't they? Arsenal then have got to be perfect between now and the end of the season, and both of those things are extremely unlikely. So I say extremely unlikely. I mean, that probably doesn't do justice to it. So yeah, it's kind of, you know, without wanting to say, it is in the bag, isn't it? And those fixtures do look kind. And for Liverpool, it's now, you know, they've lost 2 on the bounce there. It's been a really disappointing week, but, you know, have a reset, come back, enjoy a strong finish to this season, and try and get as many points as you possibly can, and get that really high points tally as well, because that will build belief. And yeah, just finish the season on a high, and then everyone will be on that kind of May Day that everybody has been dreaming about for 30 years. Yeah. Really, we'll get to enjoy it and be, you know, love that moment, and also be excited for what's to come in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much to look forward to. And I suppose as we come to the end of this, there's always that remembrance that pain and pleasure go hand in hand. One usually follows the other. And whilst it's all right to be a little bit upset about yesterday, there is maybe now just a chance to regroup, reassess, and enjoy the run until the end of the season where the Reds are going to win the Premier League. It is that simple. All it leaves me to say, as ever, is for the time, the analysis, for the insight, for answering all the questions, and hopefully for maybe perking everyone up a little bit. David, it is much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.